All right, so you send in this Auditor General's report all about the ATO and AI. And I got to say, I was hooked, like from page one. This thing is hot off the presses. We're talking January 23rd, hot.
Okay.
And it's got me thinking differently about how we interact with the ATO.
Yeah, it is a very timely report, especially with the government's new AI guidelines that just came out in September.
Totally. And here's what really caught my eye. The ATO, they already have 43 AI models up and running. 43. I mean, I knew they were, dipping their toes into AI. But this is like a full-on cannonball.
It is. It really shows their commitment to using data and technology to modernize how they do things.
And these aren't just, theoretical models sitting on a server somewhere. They're actually out there in the world, like analyzing our tax returns to spot potential issues, making sure everyone's playing by the rules.
Exactly. They're even using AI to help write the letters they send to taxpayers.
Wait, are you serious? So AI is helping to craft those official ATO communications. That's kind of wild. I mean, is it going to sound like a robot wrote it?
Well, that's a question that the report actually brings up. How is this going to affect the public's perception of the ATO?
I guess it depends on how good the AI is. I mean, if it's super smooth and human sounding, maybe it'll take some of the sting out of getting one of those letters. But then again, maybe it'll just make people feel even more like they're dealing with some faceless machine.
Right. That's one of the big challenges with adopting AI, especially for government agencies. It's all about finding that balance between being efficient and maintaining public trust.
Okay, so the ATO is clearly embracing AI, but are they doing it responsibly? That's the million-dollar question, right? What does this report have to say about that?
So the audit gives the ATO a partly effective rating, which is a bit of a mixed bag. It means they're making progress, but there's definitely room for improvement. Especially when it comes to their governance framework, they're actually working on a new AI policy and a risk management guide.
So they're still figuring things out as they go.
To some extent, yeah. Remember, the government's AI policy for agencies is still pretty new, so everyone is still adjusting.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it sounds like there could be some, growing pains along the way.
Oh, definitely. And one of the biggest concerns in the report is around roles and responsibilities. It's not always clear who's ultimately in charge of making sure AI is being used ethically and effectively at the ATO.
Yeah, that's a little unsettling, isn't it? I mean, who's steering the ship when it comes to these powerful AI systems?
Exactly. And that lack of clarity can lead to real consequences, especially when you start thinking about the ethical side of things, which is another area where the audit found some gaps.
Okay, hold on. Ethical considerations. This is where it starts to get really interesting and maybe a little bit scary. This report mentions something called data ethics assessments, right? Like checks and balances to make sure the AI is actually being used fairly.
Absolutely, those assessments are crucial. You have to make sure AI systems don't perpetuate biases or, infringe on people's rights.
But here's the thing. The report found that a whopping 74% of the ATO's AI models in production haven't gone through those proper ethical checks. 74%. I mean, that's a lot.
It is a significant number, and it raises serious questions about whether those models are actually fair and unbiased. And without those assessments, it's really hard to know how these systems are making decisions. Which brings us to another really important topic, transparency.
Right, because if we don't even understand how these AI models work, how can we trust that they're making fair and impartial decisions?
That's the challenge. Transparency is absolutely key for building trust, especially when it comes to the government using AI. And the report is saying that this is an area where the ATO really needs to step up.
And it's not like they don't have any guidance. Remember, the government released that whole of government data ethics framework last December.
Right. That framework was designed to provide best practices and, ensure some consistency across all government agencies. So the fact that the ATO is lagging behind on those ethical assessments is a bit of a red flag.
Okay, so we've got this potential for bias, a lack of transparency, and it's not even clear who's accountable. Not exactly a recipe for peace of mind, especially when it comes to something as important as our taxes.
I understand why you'd feel uneasy about it. But remember, this report is a step towards more transparency and accountability. It's shining a light on these issues so that they can be addressed.
So the ATO knows about these shortcomings.
They do. In fact, they themselves have identified the misuse of data and analytics as one of their main concerns. They've even labeled it above tolerance, which means they know it's a serious issue.
Wow, above tolerance. That sounds pretty alarming. So what are they actually doing about it? What does the report recommend?
Well, the audit suggests that the ATO needs to basically overhaul how they manage risk when it comes to AI. They need more detailed assessments, clearer processes, and a much stronger system for identifying and mitigating potential risks.
So basically, they need to level up their AI game,
Yeah.
not just in terms of the technology, but also how they manage it and govern its use.
Exactly. It's not enough to just have the shiniest new AI tools. You need to have the right frameworks and safeguards in place to make sure those tools are being used responsibly and ethically.
And speaking of tools, there's one that's on everyone's mind these days. Generative AI. You know, the stuff that powers ChatGPT. Turns out the ATO is already using this too.
Our ATO staff have access to a number of generative AI tools that have been approved, and they've even developed a policy and a risk-based approval process for using them.
Okay, but here's what I found really interesting. The ATO has already reported 6 breaches of their own generative AI policy. 6. And those were all self-reported, which makes you wonder what else might be going on behind the scenes.
It does make you wonder, and it really shows how quickly this technology is evolving. Even government agencies are having trouble keeping up with the changes and the risks.
It's like the Wild West of AI out there, even inside the ATO. You know, let's bring this back down to earth for a second. Let's talk about something that affects all of us. You ready for this?
Yeah.
The ATO is using AI to scrutinize those work-related expense claims we all put on our tax returns.
Yes, they have multiple AI models that are specifically looking at those claims
Yeah.
and flagging anything that looks like it might be out of line.
And we're not talking small change here. The ATO estimates that incorrect work-related expenses make up a massive $3.6 billion of the tax gap. That's billion with a B.
It's a huge amount. It's clear that this is an area where they see AI as a really valuable tool for improving compliance.
So knowing that AI is watching, does it make you more careful about what you claim on your taxes? Or does it make you less trusting of the whole system? It's a question worth thinking about.
It raises important questions about fairness and transparency in the whole tax system.
And speaking of fairness, the report also found that the ATO needs to do better in another area. They don't have a very robust system for monitoring their AI models once they're actually in use. There's no consistent performance tracking, no regular checks for bias.
And that's a problem because AI models can drift over time. Their performance can change, and they can even develop new biases that weren't there before.
So it's not just a set it and forget it situation with these AI systems.
Definitely not. Continuous monitoring is crucial to make sure these systems are actually working the way they're supposed to and not producing unfair or harmful outcomes.
Well, the good news is that the ATO is working on a new performance monitoring framework. But here's the catch it's not expected to be fully up and running until December 2026. So more catching up to do, it seems.
It does seem that way.
Makes you wonder what else they're still figuring out. But you know what? Let's save that thought for later, because we're just getting started with this deep dive. We've got a lot more to uncover about the ATO and its adventures in the world of AI. Okay, so we've established that ATO is like really going all in on AI. But it sounds like they're still working out some of the kinks. What else did this report uncover that we should know about?
So one area the audit looked at was the ATO's use of AI to assess something called unexplained wealth.
Unexplained wealth. That sounds kind of ominous, like something out of a crime thriller.
Well, it's actually a pretty straightforward concept. Basically, it means that the ATO is using data and algorithms to find situations where someone's lifestyle or their assets don't really match up with the income they're reporting.
So like if I suddenly start driving a Lamborghini and buying beachfront property, but my tax return says I'm barely scraping by, that might raise a few eyebrows.
Exactly. And the ATO is increasingly using AI to help them spot these potential cases of unexplained wealth. They're using something called the Tax Practitioner Risk Model, which also takes into account the tax agents people are using.
Wait, hold on. So they're using AI to assess whether our tax agents might be helping us hide wealth? That adds a whole other layer of complexity.
It does, and the report points out that there are some challenges with this approach. For example, the ATO hasn't fully documented how this particular AI model works, which makes it difficult to assess whether it's fair and accurate.
There's that transparency issue again. It's hard to trust a system when you don't understand how it's making decisions.
Right, and that's something the ATO needs to address if they want to maintain public trust in how they're using AI.
Okay, so unexplained wealth is one area where AI is playing a bigger role. What else?
The report also talks about the ATO's use of AI to look at rental property expenses.
Rental properties. Always a hot topic when it comes to taxes.
That's right. And the ATO knows that rental income can be an area where people might underreport. So they've developed specific AI models to look for things like, discrepancies between the rental income someone declares and the actual market rates.
So if I try to fudge the numbers on my rental income to, save a few bucks on taxes, AI might be the one to catch me.
Potentially, yes. And it raises a really interesting point about how AI is changing the relationship between taxpayers and the ATO.
How so?
Well, in the past, tax compliance was often based on this kind of trust but verify approach. The ATO generally assumed that most people were honest, but they had systems in place to catch the outliers.
But now with AI, it feels like the default is shifting towards suspicion. Like Big Brother is always watching, analyzing our every financial move.
That's a good observation. And it's something the ATO needs to be really careful about. If people feel like they're being unfairly targeted by algorithms, it
Hmm.
could really damage trust in the entire system.
Yeah, the last thing we need is a tax system where people feel like they're constantly under suspicion.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between using the power of AI and making sure that people see it as fair and transparent.
Okay, so we've talked about unexplained wealth rental properties.
Hmm.
What other areas is the ATO using AI to scrutinize?
Well, the report also looks at how they're using AI to target the black economy.
The black economy. Okay, now that sounds like something straight out of a spy movie.
Basically, it refers to economic activity that's hidden from the authorities, usually to avoid paying taxes, like cash in hand payments or under the table deals.
So how is AI helping the ATO crack down on this,
Yeah.
this shadowy underworld of tax evasion?
They're using AI to analyze tons of data from all sorts of sources, looking for patterns and things that just don't add up. That might suggest there's some black economy activity going on. For instance, they might look at things like inconsistencies between a business's income and the expenses they're reporting, or unusual cash flow patterns.
So like if a business is showing a lot of income but hardly any expenses, that might be a red flag.
Exactly. And they're using AI to automate this analysis, basically sifting through mountains of data to find these potential cases.
It sounds like AI is giving the ATO some serious firepower to go after tax evaders.
It is. And this could make the tax system fairer by making sure that everyone is paying their share. But it also raises questions about things like privacy and surveillance.
Right, because if the ATO is using AI to go through all this data about our financial transactions, where does that leave our privacy? It feels a little bit like a slippery slope.
That's a legitimate concern. And it's one that the ATO needs to be upfront about. They need to be transparent about how they're using AI to target the black economy and make sure they're respecting people's privacy rights.
Sounds like a tricky balancing act. They need to be tough on tax evasion, but also protect people's privacy.
Exactly. It's something that requires a lot of careful thought and open discussion.
Okay, so we've covered unexplained wealth rental properties and the black economy. What else is on the ATO's AI agenda?
Well, the report also highlights how the ATO is using AI to improve their debt collection processes.
Debt collection. Now that's a topic that's sure to get people's attention.
I know it's not the most exciting part of the tax system, but it is important, and the ATO is using AI to try to make it more efficient and hopefully more fair.
So what does that look like in practice? Are they using AI to chase down people who owe back taxes?
Well, sort of, but it's more nuanced than that. The ATO is using AI to analyze data about taxpayers who have outstanding debts and predict how likely they are to repay those debts.
So they're using AI to figure out who's most likely to pay up and who might need a little extra nudge.
Basically, yeah. And this lets the ATO tailor their approach to debt collection more effectively. For example, they might offer more flexible payment options to people who are struggling financially, but are still considered likely to repay their debt over time.
That sounds like a more compassionate approach than just sending out threatening letters or, hitting people with penalties.
That's the goal. The ATO wants to use AI to make debt collection less adversarial and more focused on finding solutions that work for both the taxpayer and the government.
That's good to hear that they're trying to use AI to make the system more humane. But I have to ask, are there any risks with using AI for debt collection? Could it lead to people being unfairly targeted or treated differently based on their data?
Those are definitely valid concerns. It's really important that the ATO has safeguards in place to make sure that AI is being used ethically and fairly in debt collection. For example, they need to make sure that their AI models aren't biased against certain groups of people, or that they don't end up with people being unfairly denied access to payment plans or other support.
It sounds like there's a lot of potential for AI to improve the tax system, but also a lot of responsibility to make sure it's used wisely and ethically.
Absolutely. And this is where transparency and accountability are so important. The ATO needs to be open about how they're using AI and allow for public scrutiny to ensure that these systems are being used fairly and responsibly.
It seems like transparency is the key theme here. And it makes sense. If we're going to trust the ATO to use AI in a way that benefits everyone, we need to understand how it's being used and have a say in how it's developed.
I agree. Public trust is essential for any government institution to function effectively, and the ATO is no different. As AI becomes more and more integrated into the tax system, maintaining that trust is going to require open communication, clear guidelines, and a real commitment to ethical considerations.
Well said. All this talk about debt collection and the black economy is making me a little anxious. I think we need a break from the serious stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've dug into some pretty intense stuff like, unexplained wealth and even the black economy. It's kind of mind-blowing to see how the ATO is using AI to tackle those challenges. But you know what I've been wondering about? How's all this AI stuff affecting small businesses?
That's a really good question, and the report actually spends a lot of time looking at how the ATO is applying AI to small business dealings.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I think of AI and the ATO, my mind kind of goes to those big, headline-grabbing tax evasion cases. But small businesses are like the backbone of the economy, right? They definitely deserve a closer look.
Absolutely. And the audit found that the ATO is using AI in a bunch of different ways when it comes to small businesses. Some of them are pretty straightforward, others not so much.
Okay, so give me an example of how AI is being used specifically with small businesses.
Well, one example is an AI model they call the Black Economy Omitted Income Scoring Job. It sounds super technical, I know, but basically it's designed to predict how likely a small business is to underreport their income.
So basically, AI is trying to figure out which small businesses might be, let's just say, creative with their accounting.
Yeah, you could put it that way. The idea is that this model helps the ATO focus its resources on the businesses that are statistically more likely to be, not following the rules.
Okay, I can see how that could be efficient, but it also feels a little presumptive, like guilty until proven innocent.
That's one of the concerns the report brings up. It questions whether this particular AI model is being used fairly and transparently, especially when it comes to small businesses.
I mean, small business owners are already dealing with so much. The last thing they need is to feel like they're being unfairly targeted by some algorithm.
Exactly. And the report points out that the ATO hasn't really explained to small businesses how this AI model works or how it might affect them.
There's that transparency issue again. It seems like a recurring theme in this whole report.
It definitely is, and it's especially important when you're talking about small businesses, because they often don't have the same resources as big companies to navigate these complicated systems.
So it's not just about income. Are there other ways the ATO is using AI to keep tabs on small businesses?
Yeah, they're also using AI to scrutinize GST reporting by small businesses.
GST, the bane of every small business owner's existence.
Tell me about it. The ATO has a whole bunch of AI models that analyze things like business activity statements, looking for any red flags that might indicate someone's not complying with the rules.
So even if I'm, carefully recording every transaction and dotting all my I's and crossing all my T's, AI might still flag me as suspicious.
It's possible, and that's why it's so important for the ATO to get this right. They need to make sure that these AI models are accurate and unbiased, and that they're being used transparently.
Because the stakes are pretty high for small businesses, right? If they get unfairly flagged or penalized, it could really hurt their bottom line.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance. The ATO wants to use AI to make sure everyone's playing by the same rules and prevent tax evasion. But they also need to be aware of how it might affect small businesses, who are often operating on very tight margins.
Yeah, and let's be real. A lot of small business owners are already feeling the pressure from rising costs and all the economic uncertainty. They don't need the added stress of feeling like Big Brother is constantly looking over their shoulder.
It's true, the ATO needs to be careful not to lose the trust of small business owners.
And that brings us back to that core issue of public trust. If people lose faith in the system, if they feel like it's rigged against them, it really undermines the whole point of having a tax system in the first place.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. The ATO has to show that they're using AI responsibly and ethically, not just to be efficient, but also to keep that public confidence in the fairness and the integrity of the tax system.
Well said. I'm so glad we took the time to really dig into this side of the report.
Right.
It's not just about the technology, it's about the human impact.
It really is. When it comes down to it, the tax system is about people. It's about making sure that everyone's contributing fairly to the things we all need and benefit from. And as AI becomes a bigger and bigger part of that system, we need to make sure that it's being used to help people, not the other way around.
Well put. And honestly, this whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. I'm seeing the ATO's use of AI in a totally new light. It's clear they're going all in on this technology.
Yeah.
But there's definitely still some work to do to make sure it's being used responsibly. responsibly and ethically.
I agree completely. This report is a great step towards more transparency and accountability. It's highlighting both the potential benefits and the potential risks of using AI in the tax system. And it's starting important conversations about how we want this technology to be used.
And to all of you listening out there, I hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about. The ATO's use of AI is only going to grow in the coming years. So staying informed, asking questions, getting involved in these conversations is more important than ever.
And don't forget, you can find a link to the full Auditor General's report in the show notes if you're interested in learning more about any of the things we've talked about today.
Great point. And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but the conversation doesn't end here. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world around you.